With no further ado, I am going to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Abbas Barzegar, who is a professor at Georgia State University and will be arguing for broadly the principles of boycott. Thank you.
Thank you, Dalia, and thank you, ISPU, and all the colleagues, and you, all the audience, for being here. I want to start by saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I want to be clear that this afternoon I won't be making any appeal to the Quran or the Sunnah to reaffirm my position, but directly to your aql and mantiq, your reason and your logic. I will be appealing here really only to history, both to think about the past that brings us to this present and to think about the future that will define how we are remembered in this certain moment. And so I'd like to just start by saying that the principle of boycott, of strike, of protest is one of the most valuable tools of modern citizenship. It is one of the most valuable tools that American citizens have, that global citizens have, to fight against injustice, to raise their own voice when they are voiceless. It is one of the most important ways in which you can exert pressure onto a system that you have no control about. And so I'd like to start with just a couple of historic examples that might resonate with you, might resonate with myself, and get us to think about why boycott is so important. And there's no better example than this weekend. We are in Chicago on Labor Day, and most folks might not realize, but Labor Day around the world actually is May 1st, all right? May Day. And that is an international day of worker solidarity that was based off of a protest here, a labor union protest here in Chicago that led a march of 80,000 workers to support the right of your 8-hour workday. That 80,000 worker march spread to 350,000 strikers across the country, shutting down 1,500 factories around this nation, and that started the legislative process to enable us to have a humane labor system, okay, a humane 8-hour workday. They never named Labor Day on May Day because they didn't want to give that much credit to that event, but they postponed it. But the rest of the world remembers Chicago on May Day, okay? And so boycott was effective there. My own personal heritage, in my own personal heritage, boycott is extremely important to me. My name is Abbas Barzegar, which is a Farsi name, and it hides my Hispanic roots. I was born to a Chicano family in northern New Mexico, and my entrance into political consciousness as an early adolescent was through my uncles, who were part of a number of Chicano rights organizations. One of those was led by the great Cesar Chavez. And Cesar Chavez is a lesser-known figure in American history, and easy to forget in light of, towering figures like Martin Luther King or Malcolm X. But Cesar Chavez worked across broad coalitions to fight for farmers' rights, through hunger strikes, through boycotts, through shutting down agricultural sectors, in order to simply demand that you don't use poison on the plants that these workers are picking, okay? There was no other way except boycott to achieve those rights. And one of the examples of boycott, of economic boycott, that we might come to light in a very difficult, that we might bring to light in a very kind of difficult and sensitive space for us, is over the issue of the Muhammad cartoons, okay? Now I know that this is a hard one for us to deal with. This is a hard one for us to even return to discuss intelligently or anything. But in between all of the Charlie Hebdos and all the sort of right to free speech this, free speech that, back in 2006, there was a concerted effort across the Arab world to simply boycott Danish products because of the Danish cartoons. Now say what you will about that as an effective strategy to achieve a political end. I believe that everybody who participated in that boycott, and everybody in this room realizes that there was no way you're going to stop people publishing offensive cartoons by boycotting cheese. But what did that economic boycott do? It let a 6th grader in Palestine realize that the cheese he eats, he has a choice over. He has a voice over, okay? It enabled a kind of democratic, nonviolent political empowerment. And that is an empowerment that extended to $1.5 billion of damages in the Danish export economy to the Middle East. Again, Did it achieve the goal? No. And people in our own communities sabotaged the whole process. But it did exert pressure on a public conversation in Europe about their own limits of free speech, and it did give voice to us in a way that was effective, that didn't have to kowtow to this rhetoric of free speech, civilized society. It protected and gave voice to our rights. That economic boycott was extremely important, and we have completely forgotten. So now, as we move to the elephant in the room, on our three major topics, and I think that we will all address them in separate ways, over the last few years, the subject of boycott and sanctions have really rocked the leadership of our community. And I want to say that the very conversation has been so politically taxing, and I want everybody to ask, what is the political cost? What is the political opportunity cost of this conversation, of investing in certain groups? Okay, I support a boycott of a number of kinds of activities that our leadership is engaged in. Let us not beat around the bush. Everybody knows about the MLI program. Everybody knows how divisive it has been. I want to ask for a historical reference here. 50 years from now, when my grandchildren ask me, where were you when this was going on? When Gaza was getting pounded? What did you do? I want to say that I was at this podium asking for this program to be suspended, okay? There is no judge better than history to determine our actions, and I want to ask everybody to realize that it is very clear from that vantage point. What is the political cost? What are you sacrificing, okay? Also, when my grandchildren ask, hey, when the FBI had informants crawling around your community for 10 years after 9/11, and then they presented this counter-violent extremism community cooperation program to you, what did you do? I'll say I did like they told me in the 80s with the drug programs. Just say no. Just say no. You cannot, at a moment where the Irvine 11, okay, where Craig Monte, you guys remember the story about the FBI informant that was setting up entrapment cases of jihad within the Irvine Mosque community? All right, you cannot say at this moment that that was a valuable moment of engagement. What is the transaction cost? What are we getting in return? We need to boycott and sanction and protest infiltrative practices that are that are actually hurting our community greatly. And so I guess I'm out of time, Danny? Is that what you're doing? Okay. All right, thank you very much.